Hi, I'm going to share some really important information here in relation to mandatory vaccination, forced vaccinations, compulsory vaccinations that we are all apparently going to start possibly from August or later this year, toward the end of this year. So Boris Johnson has recently announced that Oxford Research Centre, which does have connections to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, has produced a vaccine and has started trials already, and it should be ready, widely available to the public by August. And just yesterday, or was it the same day that he announced this, or the day after, Bill and Melinda Gates were there at number 10 meeting with Boris Johnson. And yeah, UK to be first vaccinated in the world. First I must apologise for my voice. I am autoimmune. I've been under a lot of stress. It does affect my respiratory systems from time to time, and it alters my voice, as you'll notice through my videos. Sometimes my voice is very clear, sometimes I'm a bit croaky. Unfortunately, this is one of those days, but the information's so important and we have so little time, and you need to share this information. So please do watch the video to the end, do check the links, do pass the information on, if not the video. So to start with, there's this article which was brought to my attention by Ryan at Last American Vagabond, and I'm going to explore a bit further. Well, just examine a few more points here, different points than what is shared, but do watch his videos, which will be under this link. And also thanks to Whitney Webb, his associate, who is a brilliant journalist and writes fantastic articles. So thank you to both of them for alerting me to this and the information, other information now that I've found from this. So this is an article by Scientific American. We're not dealing, this isn't conspiracy theory or alternative news, okay. It was written July 16th, 2018 by Sharon Begley. Potential DNA damage from CRISPR seriously underestimated, study finds. A flurry of recent findings highlight a contentious question in this area, and it's related to gene editing. That's what it's a form of vaccine that contains, or treatment that contains, is it biotechnology to edit genes in order to cut out genes that cause illness or that are susceptible to illness and stuff like this. This is the basic principle of it. It basically re-edits our DNA in order to help defend our body from certain illnesses and perhaps even viruses. So I'm not going to read you the whole article, I'm just going to read you little bits of it, and I'll leave the link to it and you can read the whole article. But the bits that I'm picking out here are the important bits that people need to understand. And, the reason why this is important, because it does, all the evidence very strongly suggests, and from Bill Gates' own statements, that this is the route they're going around, gene editing our DNA. But whether they do or not go down this route, all the information I'm sharing here is still of relevance to this approaching compulsory vaccine. From the earliest days of CRISPR Cas9 era, scientists have known that the first step in how it edits genomes, snipping DNA, creates an unholy mess. Cellular repairmen, that's these little They're like bio sort of machines in our body that fix our DNA and do all kinds of amazing, wonderful things. Frantically try to fix the cuts by throwing random chunks of DNA into the breach and deleting other random bits. Research published on Monday, this is in 2018, suggests that only the tip of a Titanic-sized iceberg. CRISPR-Cas9 can cause significantly greater genetic havoc than experts thought, the study concludes, perhaps enough to threaten the health of patients who would one day receive CRISPR-based therapy. The results come hard on the heels of 2 studies that identified a related issue. Some CRISPR cells might be missing a key anti-cancer mechanism and therefore be liable to initiate tumours. Now, in my recent research studying COVID-19, I have come across scientific papers, published studies on attempts at treating SARS, at trying to find a vaccine or a treatment for original SARS-CoV. And those studies were done around 2002, 2003, 2005. And they did try using this same DNA editing approach. And every single creature that they were testing on did develop tumours. And there was another way that they was testing, and every single creature actually died of the illness that they were supposedly vaccinated against. So, you know, there's those 2 routes, whichever routes they're going, you know. So now coming to the end of this article, because this is where the key information that we need is here. The possibility of adverse consequences from CRISPR cells has caused some company officials to argue that if, say, their therapy cures a child of a devastating disease but increases her risk of cancer, that might be an acceptable trade-off. And here we have a UK column presenting Bill Gates. Again, I'll leave you this link of UK column, brilliant news providers, highly recommend. And we've got Bill Gates more or less saying the same thing, talking about side effects and things, and saying governments will have to be involved because there will be some risk and indemnification will be needed, which means non-liability. Boris Johnson, Trump, various other governments have very kindly waived liability. So the people administering treatments for COVID-19, the people producing them, the government ordering them, the people enforcing the government orders to have the compulsory vaccine or whatever, they're all non-liable should people suffer adversely as a result of that vaccine or treatment. So, getting back to the article. That argument may well prevail. In 2003, however, when a boy in a gene therapy trial in France developed leukemia because the repair gene landed in the wrong place in his genome and activated a cancer-causing gene, it shut down gene therapy development on both sides of the Atlantic for years. So you can see there's a link here that this article is directly citing this study, you see, about this boy in a trial therapy, in a trial in France. So let's have a look at that. What does this say? So we haven't got the whole study article here, but for what we need, for our purposes as lay medics, because, you know, we've only got a few months, haven't we, with this vaccine looming ahead, COVID-19 compulsory vaccine looming ahead. We've not all got time to become part-time medics, have we? But for the purposes of what we need to know, this single paragraph here is ample. And this is just an example of many such kind of studies. There's hundreds of them, you know, not all related to this particular type of therapy, but nonetheless. So this was published January 16, 2003. A serious adverse event after successful gene therapy for X-linked severe combined immunodeficiency. So in this case, the gene editing approach is being used for immunodeficiency disease. Okay? We recently reported the sustained correction of X-linked severe combined immunodeficiency disease by ex vivo retrovirally mediated transfer of the YC gene into CD34 plus cells in 4 of 5 patients with the disease. So that probably means one patient had a placebo. I don't really, you know, I'm not a medic, so I don't understand the terminology, but I presume retrovirally mediated transfer of the gene, you know, the DNA altering gene, was introduced into the body through a pathogen, a virus, a retrovirus maybe, so that the body, the immune system absorbs the gene through the virus, and then that gene then re-edits our own DNA and snips bits of it out here and there. These results have since been confirmed in 4 additional patients with typical X-linked severe combined immunodeficiency. Of the first 4 successfully treated patients, 3 continue to do well up to 3.6 years after gene therapy, whereas a serious adverse event occurred in the 4th patient at a routine checkup 30 months, that's 2.5 years, after gene therapy. Lymphocytosis was confirmed, leukemia. Okay. And, you know, that was confirmed in 4 additional patients. So they did it again with another 4 additional patients, and the exact same thing happened. That enough for them to conclude that it was the gene therapy, the gene treatment that actually caused the leukemia. So these are the points that we need to pick up on here. Okay? Because, look, 3.6 years, the trial was ongoing, 3.6 years. After 3.6 years, the trial was still ongoing. After 2.5 years, one of the patients had developed leukemia as a direct result of the treatment. That was confirmed. Okay? Now, imagine if these same people were having millions of pounds, dollars, billions thrown at them, and they were being asked to develop a treatment. Say immunodeficiency disease was instead COVID-19, and they've been asked to develop this treatment within a few months, get it through trials, and then unleash it onto the public. Well, a quarter of the population within 3 years, within the space of 3 years, a quarter of population would have developed leukemia after being treated to protect them and others from a viral infection that has only a 0.something fatality rate, and that the vast majority of people who contract that virus are going to exhibit no symptoms or very mild symptoms. Okay? So it doesn't compute, does it? A quarter of the population coming down with leukemia. But that is what is happening with this same approach now, you see. Because according to the evidence, and as I say, this is just one example of these type of studies, that's why the trials and testing go on for years before they're given to the public, precisely because a couple of years can go by before you realise what the damages are, and the damages can be devastating, very, very serious. That's why it's a very serious matter. When a populace is facing a compulsory vaccine that's been produced in just a few months, you see. Because, like I say, these scientists, if this was COVID-19, these scientists, they would have, of the first 4 successfully treated patients, all was successful, everything was going fine. The immune deficiency disease had gone, everything was going fine. Within the first few months, within the first 2.5 years, but let's say the first few months, because this lot have got a few months, so within the first few months, everything's fine. Yeah, come on, go and inject the whole population. That's why it's really sick, that, you know, that's why this just cannot happen. And you see, we've got Alan Dershowitz here, paedophile pal.
But never...
paedophile defender, explaining to the American public, as Boris Johnson and other people have been explaining to the British public, that actually our human rights or constitutional and legal rights can be completely bypassed, and we can be forced to have a vaccine or else suffer a punishment if we don't comply. Now, you see, this is a matter of law, and the law is always on balance. And so, you know, like for example, the government has ordered that people have to get the car MOT'd every year, and we comply with that order because we understand that, yes, cars that are unfit, that are unroadworthy, are a danger to the people, to the drivers themselves and other people. So we all comply with that order, and if we don't comply, we'll suffer some form of punishment, and we won't be allowed to drive even. As Alan Dershowitz is here, he's saying, if you don't have the vaccine, then you should stay at home. You're going to have to stay at home, never go out, never mix with anybody. You should be punished somehow for not having the vaccine. But no, because as we've seen by the scientific medical evidence, the risk posed by the vaccine, a vaccine produced in just a few months that hasn't gone through the necessary, that's why these trials are necessary, that's why the length of time taken is usually 5 to 6 years, is necessary in order so that we don't end up in a worse situation than we were with the illness, and far more people impacted. Because it is the equivalent of the government forcing us to go and take our cars to get an MOT so that a mechanic can actually, you know, hand our car to people who aren't actually mechanics. So they can actually damage our car and actually make our car more dangerous than it was when we went for the MOT, you know. So that's ludicrous. You see, the law is there to protect people, and the law will always protect people above and beyond government orders. When government orders are putting people in greater danger than the danger that those orders claim to be protecting people from, then that government is a criminal. And that's a crime. And anybody who assists in enforcing those orders, those criminal orders that threaten to put people in more danger, and medically, lawfully evidenced threat, when that is threatening to put people in more danger than the government claims to be protecting the people from, then anybody who enforces those orders are acting as an agent of tyranny. And any medic that would stand by and support and endorse such orders, forcing people to have experimental vaccines that have not passed trial, those medics have renegaded on their sworn medical oath, and they are agents of tyranny. If the Imperial College cannot speak out and stand up for what is right and what is safe and what is medically known according to medical science, then the Imperial College needs to be sacked and prosecuted for criminal negligence. And especially when we start to question, well, what is the agenda going on here? Why these forced vaccines? Because, you know, we come to a story like this, which, I mean, I can only say I'm horrified. My heart goes out to this family that have very sadly suffered this tragic loss of their child, and I know what it's like to lose a young family member. You know, my sister died of a flu illness at the age of 18 months when I was a child, and it was just devastating. But here we have the Liverpool Echo with this headline. I mean, exploiting a family's tragic loss, a family's grief, exploiting that in order to propagate medical xenophobia among the public. And I'm going to prove to you that that is exactly what they are doing here, that this whole article is part of what you call social engineering, in order to guide the public into along a certain route. Now, the media have played the game of opposition against the government, claiming that, oh, you know, he should have put the lockdown sooner, he's put so many lives at risk by not having the lockdown sooner. But they're both on at the same narrative, aren't they? Both government and media are pushing for the vaccine, aren't they? Pushing people towards the vaccine, you see. Boris farmer, media sheepdog. So, boy, 14, dies of rare Kawasaki-like disease linked to coronavirus. I've heard from people that actually it's linked, as far as they're concerned, to vaccines in children, but you know, I haven't looked into that. So I'll take it at face value that it's linked to coronavirus. And you can scroll into the article and you find a teenage boy with no underlying health conditions has tragically died from a rare disease linked to COVID-19. Okay. Well, first of all, coronavirus refers to a variety of cold and flu viruses. Coronavirus does not mean COVID-19. The press and media keep pushing that forward. They keep mixing the two. They keep talking about coronavirus and then talking about COVID-19. But actually, COVID-19 is one strain of a variety of coronaviruses. What they're doing is they're testing people for coronavirus and assuming that they have COVID-19 and treating them as if they have COVID-19 because they are not testing specifically for COVID-19. Anybody entering a hospital, dead or alive, who tests positive for coronavirus is assumed to have COVID-19. If the person dies, even people dying in road traffic accidents apparently, if they test positive for coronavirus, they get added to the COVID-19 death list. That is fraud. So we've got fraud happening, you know, and that this is a fact. This isn't a theory. We know that this is what's happening. They've even admitted it, that people who die with coronavirus are added to the list of deaths of dying of coronavirus. Cancer patients, heart attack, all added to the COVID-19 list. Why? Why do they need to bump them up? This part here, no underlying health conditions. Most children that develop Kawasaki disease, the vast majority of them do not have any underlying health conditions. But obviously that is mentioned here, isn't it? In order, again, to ramp up the fear that, look, COVID-19, it can kill children. You don't need to have, and they don't need any they're not children with underlying health problems. This is really serious, people. Serious. So they're telling an outright lie because there is absolutely no way that they can claim that this Kawasaki disease is linked to COVID-19 without extensive studies to prove that. Oh, but the Liverpool Echo can claim that, can't they? The Liverpool Echo will say it's linked to COVID-19. So let's have a look at Kawasaki disease, shall we? Here it is on the NHS. Kawasaki disease. Who's affected? Around 8 in every 100,000 children develop Kawasaki disease in the UK each year. Well, how many children are there between the ages of, say, 0 and 16 in Britain? So 8 in every 100,000 develop Kawasaki disease every year. So what, that could be 100 children, 200 children, 300. And it can be fatal. Research carried out in England from 1998 to 2003 found 72% of children with Kawasaki disease were under the age of 5. The condition was also shown to be 1.5 times more common in boys than girls. So, you know, they were researching this disease in 1998 to 2003. There was no COVID-19 around then, were there? So COVID-19 is not the cause of Kawasaki disease, is it? And again, we have more ambiguous things here. Over 20 children with a rare form of inflammatory Kawasaki disease have been treated at a London hospital. With a rare form. But no, Kawasaki disease is a rare disease. And nobody can say, at this moment in time, nobody can ascribe that or even assume that it's linked to COVID-19. Now, as I say, the media have been playing games, this game of, oh, we're opposing the government, and saying that, oh, you know, the government needs, there needs to be an inquiry or even prosecution against Boris Johnson because he didn't bring the lockdown soon enough and he's caused such damage. When we all know, you know, people like me and my friends and my friend who ended up in hospital with pneumonia, very strange flu we all had in November. My neighbours whose family went down with the same during November and December, very strange flu. The lockdown comes in March. No, in fact, parents and people who've lost loved ones now, directly through the lockdown, There needs to be an inquiry into why this country decided to follow the dictates of communist China. Okay, because this lockdown has spiked the death rates. It's killed far more people. In countries like Sweden, for example, where they didn't have a lockdown, there were a high number of cases, but the number of fatalities are low, are lower than Britain. Because Kawasaki disease is rare. So when you've got like a cluster of children suddenly developing this, that tells us something about children's immunity. Because children are developing human beings, their immunity is developing, and they need fresh air, they need contact with the external world to be building up their immunity every day. It is a known fact that lack of UV light decreases vitamin D production and lowers the immunity. It's a known fact that stress lowers immunity. Children no longer allowed to play with their friends or go to see grandma or go on the beach or go and do this. At home with parents who are stressed, who are perhaps fearful themselves because they're still having to work because they're a key worker and they're at risk and they're worried all the time. Or parents who are stressed because they've got no money, they're facing perhaps eviction at some point because they've lost their job, they've lost their business. Children who are afraid that mummy or daddy might die of COVID-19 or grandma or their friends or they might get it. All of those factors combined reduce immunity. They reduce immunity drastically in adults. So that will then contribute to even worse illnesses in adults. And then you've got the mechanism of auto-suggestion, that telling people who've got symptoms of a common cold that they've got coronavirus and that means they've got COVID-19. You know, that auto-suggestion could actually inspire a person's body to respond in extreme ways to what should have been a common cold, that they could come down with the severest form of flu and even die, because regular flu kills people every year of all ages, not just elderly people. Elderly people are the majority, but children do die. Like I say, my perfectly healthy sister died at 18 months old of flu. So now children are developing Kawasaki disease and who knows what else, because they've been locked up. That is not the way to protect children from an illness that has less than a 1% fatality rate and actually doesn't really harm children. And teachers are saying, you know, this was on Facebook. Sorry, this was on Twitter, this article. People were writing under it, my children are definitely not going to school. Boris is a criminal. Boris is a criminal, but not because he didn't impose a lockdown soon enough. The media's a criminal for calling for it. They're both criminals. Sheepdog media. Farmer. Boris. To herd the public. Social engineering. Through fear. Terror. So they'll all go rushing. Yes, yes, give us the vaccine. And if the majority of the people buy that narrative, the pack of lies, the confusion, the fraud, then the government's justified. This is democracy. Everybody wants. But no, that is not democracy, because the people are not adequately informed. They've been attacked. And UK Column has exposed that as well, and I will leave that link of UK Column News and their article showing conclusively that yes, this is, from their own admission, from their own documents, this is social engineering. They have been socially engineering people to accept the lockdown by using the media, controlled opposition. The media, who appears to be opposing Boris Johnson, is serving him. They are not opposing Boris Johnson. They are serving him and his cabal of people like Bill Gates. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who vaccinated, maimed and killed thousands of children in Africa and Asia with their experimental treatments and vaccines. Again, a man who hangs around with paedophiles, still fraternising with Epstein, even after Epstein was convicted of paedophilia. So, you know, you think about this risk, people. Think about the risk to your children. I've got the wrong thing up, sorry. So, you know, this statement here, the idea that if the therapy cures the child of a devastating disease but increases her risk of cancer, that might be an acceptable trade-off. But, sorry, COVID-19 is not a devastating disease. And no, it isn't an acceptable trade-off. Because cancer is a devastating disease, you see. And the adverse effects of vaccines can be devastating. And we cannot put our population, any government that agrees to put their population at risk of this kind of impact, like I say, a quarter of the people in the trials, a quarter of the test patients developed leukemia, developed cancer. That is really serious. And it is especially serious for a population that by the time they start developing the adverse effects of the vaccine, which might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years later, will have no human rights. May probably be living under a police state, have no voice. This is a very, very serious threat. And especially when the whole thing is on behest. Heading at the helm of it all, the whole programme, is a guy who's hell-bent on depopulation. I tell you, these issues are far too important. What I've shared here is far too important to be ignored. Everybody has to take this into account. Please share this information. And the Liverpool Echo, you know what, and this is again pure exploitation for the purpose of promoting propaganda and actually using the tragic loss of a child, a bereaved family's tragic loss, in order to promote propaganda that will persuade people through fear and terror and panic and through lies and fraud as well, to submit themselves and their children to a vaccine that could potentially cause them very, very much more harm than COVID-19, and all on the strength of actual fraud half-truths, confusion and outright lies. You know, I mean, that's how they got Brexit done, really, isn't it? Let's face it. But for that, they used Cambridge Analytica and the media to some degree. This time, it is the full-on media that are right behind this whole agenda of lockdowns, of masks, of gloves, of the vaccine. And Boris Johnson just suddenly appears with the coronavirus bill within a couple of weeks, within days, 6 days of deciding, oh, all right then, it is a pandemic, we'll have a lockdown. 6 days later, he's got that coronavirus bill that strips us of all our human rights and allows him to say, you stay at home, otherwise you're going to be fined or arrested, and you wear a mask, and you do this, and you go and have this vaccine. Well, I'm sorry, he is not allowed to do that. We do have human rights. And I am asking people, again, and I will keep asking people, 1 day a week, Thursday say, or Friday or Wednesday, whichever day, get out on your doorstep and clap and make a cheer. Bang pan lids together, drums, whistles. Shout out for our human rights. Stand up for our human rights. Because, you know, it's a waste of time protesting against these people. If we all go out en masse, you know, they'll instigate riots or whatever, and, you know, it just gives them more power. But you stand on your doorstep. Imagine the whole country. We stand on our doorstep. We shout, we whistle, we scream, we clap. We sing in support of our human rights and the people that sacrifice so much to deliver those rights and establish them. We can never give them up, because as we've just witnessed now, without any rights, without any law or legislation, you know, the people that were doing this study could have just easily, you know, if they just wanted to make money and say, hey, we found a cure for immune deficiency. Wow, we're not going to wait a year or 2 years or 3 years. We're going to, in months we found out it works, and we're just going to give it to the whole populace. But look what happened 2.5 years later. Stand up for your rights, people. We are empowered when we stand up for our rights and deliver a message to the medical professionals, the lawyers, everybody, the government, that look, we are aware, we're standing up for our human rights. We are not going to allow fear to put our children at fear of an actually minimal risk, fear of the gnat, to persuade us, to drive us to swallowing the camel. Because we're not sheep and we're not lab rats. We're human beings and we have human rights.